Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over techniques for using Distress Oxide inks with a stencil. I'm also going to be doing some stacked die cuts and stacked punches. I'm going to bring all this together in this birthday card, which I'm going to show you how to create. It's a very easy card to recreate, and I hope you will try it yourself. To make this card, I'm going to be using Stampin Up Party Pandas stamp set, the Stampin Up Balloon Celebrations stamp set. This is a two-step stamp. The Mama Elephant Panda, and it has matching dies which cut out all of the stamps. I also need the Fiskars Friendly Advice stamp set. I also need the Stampin Up Balloon Builder punch. I broke mine, but Martin has since fixed it. It still works. And I needed some gold twine. You can use whatever color you want it, but I just happen to have gold on hand. And I also need clear embossing powder. Now I'm going to move on to some stamping. I'm going to take the large piece of white, and before I do anything, I'm going to use my embossing buddy and go all over it to make sure that there is no embossing powder that sticks where I don't want it. Now I'm going to stamp the pandas, and I want to be sure that I get it really good, so I'm going to stamp it 2 times. Since it's mostly black, I really need it to be solid. And while the pandas are still wet, you're going to take it and drop it into the clear embossing powder. As long as you are fast, you can get the embossing powder to stick to your stamping, and it works just fine. Now I'm going to just go and emboss it off camera. Now that I have the pandas embossed, I'm going to take a gray watercolor pencil and I'm going to add some coloring on the pandas. I just need to add some shadow. So you go all along the left-hand side of the pandas and just bring it out about halfway. This is very easy. You don't need to add too much color. You just want to make it look like it's a little bit of shading. And once you're satisfied with it and you think that you have enough, you just take your water pencil, your water pen, and blend out the color. This just takes a quick second. It's very fast. So if you're not happy with it, just add a little bit more color until you think that it looks shaded enough. And then just set it aside and let it dry. Now I'm going to move on to the inside of the card. For the Misty tool, and this is a large rubber stamp, I need to take the foam out and just put the stamps where I need them to be on the card. Ordinarily I have this set up beforehand, but I didn't want to have the foam and the photopolymer on at the same time because it just makes it uneven. It just took a second to get it set up the way I want it. And now I just need to ink it up and stamp it twice, just like the other pandas. You have to make sure that you get a really thick impression of the pandas. As long as you're using your magnet and making sure that your cardstock doesn't move, you'll be able to stamp right over it as many times as you need with no problem. Now I just need to set this aside and let it dry. Now take the other white panel and cut it at 1 3/4 inch. This is going to be the front strip, and the remaining part will be how we get the balloons. So don't lose that front strip. Now with this particular 3-step stamp, I found it is easier to stamp the outline first. So using the 2 shades of blue and the Versafine is how we're going to create this balloon. Excuse me. So the outline is going to be stamped on the far left side of the paper because we want to make sure that when we punch it out, we have maximum paper allowed. And you'll see why in a second. So you just stamp the outline, make sure you get a really solid impression. And I probably could have used my stamp mat to ensure I got that, but I didn't bother with it. And now after that's done, come along with the most solid image. And just look through the stamp and make sure that you are lining it up to what you're seeing. It's really easy for this one as long as you start with the outline. And now the highlight is just, again, just look through the stamp and stamp it. It's really easy to do. And now we're going to take the balloon punch and punch it out. And you'll see why I started with the left-hand side of the paper. So this way I have all of this extra paper to feed through. Just take your time and line it up to make sure you get a good punch. And then just punch some more balloons, as many as you can get. And I got 3 out of this. If you want it to be thicker, you can always get some more paper. And now for the pandas, I'm going to take it to the die cut machine and cut the pandas out. So I'm just going to take a second and show you how to line it up. It's really simple. This die cut fits really nicely to the stamped image. Now that I have the pandas lined up, I'm just going to cut them out with my Big Shot machine. And just like with the balloons, I needed to get 3 of the balloons. I also need to get 3 of each of the pandas. So I'm just going to use the same bit of white paper and get the rest of them out. If you want it to be thicker, you can just get more white paper and cut out more pandas and stack them as you need it. It's really simple. Now that I have all the die cuts and punches, I'm going to take my glue and stack them on top of each other. It's always good to use a liquid adhesive when you're doing this sort of thing, because that gives you a couple of extra seconds to move it in place so that it's right lined up the way you want. And I have a total of 3, but you can take it as high as you want it to make this. It's really very simple to stack die cuts. Now that you have all the die cuts, just set them aside and let them dry. And I'm going to move on to the baker's twine. I'm quickly making a little bow, and I'm going to attach it to the balloon, and I'm going to use glue dots. You could also try and tie this around the end of the balloon, but my hand-eye coordination just isn't that good, as you can see with how much trouble I'm having getting this bow together. So you cut off the extra tail because you don't really need that. The bow will stay together. And I'm just going to put it down with this glue dot and my pokey tool. But you need to roll the glue dot up really small so that it doesn't have too much presence on the front, or your envelope or other things will stick to it. And now I'm going to move on to creating the distress panel for the outside. I'm taking a piece of paper to protect my work surface, and I'm going to just lay the stencil in place, and I'm twisting it around to make sure that I get pretty good coverage of the stencil numbers. And I'm going to take the fossilized amber and just go right across the center. I probably should have taped the stencil in place, but I decided to just try and hold it. And now I'm going to bring in the second color, which is the Wild Honey. And I just want to go on the top and the bottom of the where I've already put the amber, and then use the Fossilized amber and to blend the two together. And as you see, the stencil shifted, so I had to take time to readjust it. So really, when you're using stencils, it's a good idea to tape it down. And I probably could have skipped the Wild Honey entirely, but you know. And so then I went on to the Spice Marmalade, and I'm going to do the same thing again, adding the orange on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to overlap the Fossilized amber area and the Wild Honey area so that I get really good blending. And the final color that I'm using is the Fired Brick, and that's all at the bottom and all at the top. I'm really going to go heavy with that because I really wanted to have a huge color difference between the two. So toward the end of the paper, I'm giving it a really extra heavy heavy layering. And again, I moved the stencil, so I had to move it back. Tape your stencils, people. Tape your stencils. So I'm going to go over one more time and blend it to make sure that I got good mixture of colors. But it's really easy to blend the colors with the Distress Oxide inks. And there's the finished panel. Now I'm going to take the front of the card base, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment on the far right of it. I decided I should bring in my mat because this stamp, sometimes the words, because the letters are so small, gets a little bit icky. So now to tape down the panel, and you could have used 2 strips instead of a whole panel like I did here, but I figured why not, I had it, so I just went ahead and did it. And it's at this point that I realized that my white panel was too narrow, wasn't tall enough. So I had to trim off the black, and later I have to trim the entire card front because it's a 1/4 inch too small. Measure twice, cut once is what they say, right? So here you see it's too small and I have to go and trim it. So now it is trimmed to the right height. I wanted the pandas to have a little bit of ground under them, so I took a blue watercolor marker and I added a little line about where I thought that they should be. And it's a little higher than I needed, so I needed to move it down just a little bit. And once I have the line in place, I'm going to make it a little bit wider so they will have somewhere to stand. I'm going to just take my water pen and just spread that out and make it look like they're standing on some blue water. Okay, the rest of the card is just putting everything together. So let me do that and start some music for you. And that's the video. I didn't put the blue underneath the original one, but I'm going to go back and do that later because I really liked how that looked. It added a little bit extra dimension, and it's always nice to have a little extra sparkle. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I hope that you will try the Distress Oxide inks for yourself. The Distress Oxide inks blend beautifully, whether on stencils or regular paper, and the Distress inks also blend beautifully, but the Distress Oxide inks, you have a little bit of extra time because the ink is a little bit wetter. It's a different formulation, and it really is great. I also hope that you will try the stacked die cuts and the stacked punches. It is really very simple to make your own embellishments for the front of your cards. I'd like to thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. And I'd like to thank my brother David for the music that he's providing. I hope you're enjoying it. And I also hope by now you've developed a few favorites of his wonderful repertoire that I'm bringing you. Take care, everyone, and have a fantastic day.